I was turning 40. I'd been a parent for a while. I kind of was compelled to make a film about childhood. It was time to express something about that. But I couldn't find the spot. I couldn't find that moment. And you got the limitation of the age of the actor, so nothing seemed worthy of a full film about one little moment. All my ideas were spread out over all the process. So I kind of had given up the idea of the film. It seemed impossible. I was about to write, I was just going to write some experimental novel or something. And the hands go to hit the keyboard, and this idea comes fully formed, like, oh, well, what if you filmed a little bit of every year, and everyone just, the kids grew up, and the parents, everyone could, why can't you make a movie like that? That there wouldn't be demarcations telling you a year's past, you would just see the maturity. And so that was the idea. So that's the fun part. The tough part was, it's such an impractical, crazy idea, then the mechanics of it. And not to mention getting it financed. But actors got it. When I talked to Ethan Hawke or Patricia Arquette, they were like, that's kind of crazy, but think of the possibility. Yeah, I want to do it. Let's do it. So it was this kind of commitment to this 12-year life project. Harder to say with kids, because they don't, 12 years to a 6-year-old, my God, that's crazy. But it was a challenge, technically. It's a simple idea on one hand, but it's so impractical, I can see how it's not likely to be emulated.
Hey, stop, put the barrier up.
I only wanted 10, 15 minutes a year, so, it ended up about a 3-day shoot every year. And I had that luxury to kind of think about what goes on that year, in between, editing as we go. But yeah, the numbers are crazy. It's so impractical that we ultimately spent about 2 years in pre-production, because you had to cast and do locations and crew up and get permits and do tech scout, all the things you do with a movie, we had to do every year. And same with editing, we had to, back in the editing room. So and for a low budget feature, we ended up 2 years in pre-production, 2 years in post-production. You would never do that.
Hey, dude, welcome to the suck.
I was really looking for those little things. I wanted the film to feel like a memory, really, of like him maybe looking back over his childhood from the vantage point of the young adult that he is at the end. So I really wanted to avoid, just personally, I remember thinking those big moments that are made, they make movies about them, it's represented a lot. I was kind of like, those moments aren't what I remember. I approach everything like that. When I make a teenage movie, it's like, well, what do I remember? And here's the essence of what I remember. And I was kind of trying to do that here. It's like, well, why do I remember this little moment that no one else would? It's a collection of kind of lesser moments. So I could talk about the film on a concept, 12 years, everybody gets old, and people would ask, well, so what happens in the movie? And I was like, not much, but I was counting on the cumulative effect of, the way we perceive cinema. You really invest in these characters, and I felt that it potentially could have the significance that it has in one's own life, these little memories, if the investment was there in these characters. That these little things that have no business being in a narrative. They don't advance character, they don't advance plot, what has to be in a movie, that you actually could have that be the essence of the movie, and it would matter because you are invested in these characters.
How was your week? Well, Dad, it was kind of tough. Joey's kind of a jerk. Actually, he stole some cigarettes from his mom. He wanted me to smoke them, but I said no, because I knew what a hard time you had quitting smoking, Dad. How about that? Is that so hard?
Dad, these questions are kind of hard to answer.
What is so hard to answer? About what sculpture are you making?
It's abstract.
Okay, that's good. See, I didn't know that. I didn't know you were even interested in abstract art.
I'm not. They make us do it.
But Dad, why is it all on us though? What about you? How was your week? Who do you hang out with? Do you have a girlfriend? What have you been up to?
I see your point. So we should just let it happen more natural, right? That's what you're saying. Okay, that's what we'll do. Starting now.
I went with the kind of ethereal kid who I liked the way he thought and conversations I had with him. And there were a lot of different ways to go, but I knew he was kind of not from any mold. And a lot of that was parental. He was given a lot of leeway. He wasn't coming out of any cookie cutter at all. So, and that's who he was and who he is. So I kind of went that way. I felt he would be more of an artist. His parents are artists. Then he would be that more than maybe the class president, that kind of kid. So it was just a choice, I guess.
Have you been drinking?
A little bit.
Oh.
We live in the same town, and he's practically like my nephew or something. I just feel like he's family. So if I had an event or something, he and his parents might come. We would meet, and I might tell him like, "Hey, when you at a party this year, or if you meet a girl and find yourself in an intimate conversation, I want you to write down what you say." I want like a real teenage conversation here, or So he became a collaborator, a full artistic collaborator with kind of assignments with a guy who saw the big picture of what the film was trying to articulate and was on board for it. So it was fun to see his maturation from a kid that, when you're working with a 7-year-old, it's kind of a manipulation. Oh, now look here, and and then to see him full-blown artistic collaborator, it was a fun trajectory, I guess.
Who do you want to be, Mason? What do you want to do?
You take on projects that you want to be in your life, characters you want to be with, and this was that kind of commitment. And even though I was very busy, this was an interesting 12 years. I got a lot of other films made, and then just as a person, parent and all that. So you got to pick your projects carefully. But this was fun material to have on the back burner the whole time. It was always gestating. Everything could feed into it. It's like, oh, that could go in there. That's an interesting thought. Or really just the luxury of every year thinking. Primarily, I was thinking of what age Eller's character was. Like fourth grade, what was that? I could spend a year thinking about that and then get to refine that into whatever we shot that year. And it's really a portrait of parenting, too. I mean, personally, I had these thoughts about childhood, but I also had these thoughts about, maturing through parenting, too. That's such a big element of the movie.
You guys ready to have some fun? Yeah!
All right, don't worry about it.
Wish we could use the bumpers.
You don't want the bumpers. Life doesn't give you bumpers.
With Patricia and Ethan, you had that extra layer, but that's where I really cast them. I mean, they were both parents in their 20s. I mean, Patricia young, I think 20, she had her first kid, and, Ethan fairly young. So I think they had a lot to say about parenting. We all had a lot to say about childhood, but we also had something to say about parenting. And it ends up a collaboration, not just with each other, but with all our parents and ourselves as parents. And we had our childhoods there. So there's so many points of entry into this movie, but that's what made it such kind of an active collaboration. And we were just pulling stories and, our friends, our contemporaries who were parents and going through that. So there was it was a deep well. I knew, for a life project of 12 years, it had to be subject matter that I knew it would never be exhausted. It would always be interesting.
And rolling.
I've never had a movie where I thought, okay, this one's going to be easier. Yeah, this one's. It's always the storytelling. It's always like you're trying to crack something. There's always something that makes it near impossible, that paints you in a corner in some way that'll be very hard to get out of. So yeah, there's some kind of limitation that you've set. But that's where you kind of find the unique element of this particular story you're trying to tell usually comes out of that. You've thrown up some barrier or some limitation. So that keeps you on your toes, that's for sure.